Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 6 of the Responsive and Rested Mama Show. I'm Andrea Fallon, midwife, child health nurse, NDC practitioner, holistic sleep coach, and most importantly, mum of 2 little girls and 1 fur baby who's here right now. Sorry, I'm running a bit late today. It's so funny that I do drive through drop off for my oldest daughter who's in year 1 at school, and there's one teacher who's bit slow on the drive-through drop-off. Like, she likes to make sure all the kids are happy, they've said goodbye to their parents, and so I know when she's on there because the cars are just moving so slowly, and that was this morning. But it is nice, it's so lovely of her to make sure that all the kids are happy. But anyway, today I'm going to be talking about what happens with sleep at 8 to 10 months. I know this is something that, if you've got a baby at this age, you're wondering what is going on. So I'm looking forward to diving into this today. It is a little bit different from the 4 to 6 month age group, which I did last week. But yeah, obviously some of the same concepts still apply. But yeah, let's get started. Do ask me, feel free to ask any questions, chat them in the comments, and put them in the comments, and I will have a look at them. So when I was a new mum, I had this idea in my head that sleep would just gradually improve. And I think a lot of us have this idea that the newborn phase would be the worst phase, and that by 6 months, things would be quite good, like quite a bit better. And by 8 to 10 months, I thought we'd be looking at 1, maybe 2 wakes a night. And I was in for a rude shock. The sad thing is actually that in my child health nurse training, this is actually what we were taught, that by 6 months that babies really would only be waking once or twice a night, and that by 9 months you should be looking at night weaning your baby if you haven't already started thinking about reducing feeds because of the increase in solid intake. By then they're supposed to be on 3 meals a day, and then starting to introduce snacks. The whole idea is that, any feeding that's happening at night at this age is just for comfort. So when my daughter was around 9 months old, she was waking about every 2 hours and feeding at each of those wakes. And I was really at a loss at what I could do about it. And often I speak to mums at this stage who are actually experiencing more frequent waking since the 4 to 6 month mark. So they might have had a great sleeper, sleeping long stretches in the early phase, and then, hit 4 to 6 months, sleep deteriorated. And then by 8 to 10 months, sleep is just quite bad, and looking at sort of hourly wakes. So, it is something that I hear a lot. And of course, and mums at this stage are really exhausted. They're not sure what to do. And of course, as I covered last week, they're hearing a lot of advice. So let me know if you've heard any of this before. Your baby shouldn't be needing to feed at night now. They're having a good amount of solids. They're only feeding for comfort. Or your baby knows that as soon as they cry, that you're going to come, and you need to leave them to cry for a bit so that, they go back to sleep on their own. Or maybe you've heard, of course they don't sleep at night, or she doesn't sleep at night. You contact nap during the day, sort of implying that it's something that you're doing. So as I covered in last week's show about sleep at 4 to 6 months, this type of advice really lacks understanding of child development. So the Western cultural push for early independence influences the parenting advice that we hear. In the early to mid 1900s, it was believed that a child was rewarded with attention when they cried. If that happened, that they were rewarded with attention when they cried, that when they grew up, they would be an adult that couldn't cope with challenges. Like, basically they'd be a sook, the short version. So it was believed that the nervous system had to be trained to be tough from a very young age. And they thought that they were actually doing a favor to their babies by not responding to them and leaving them to cry, to develop these tough nervous systems. So these beliefs unfortunately still linger despite our modern knowledge of child development and neuroscience, which tells us that actually the opposite is true. Children develop independence and have regulated nervous systems when their caregiver is consistently responsive. And I think the biggest thing is that children are not mini adults. So there is a trajectory of child development that includes generally predictable stages. And if we project our fears onto our little ones about the kind of adult that they're going to grow up to be and ignore what they're developmentally capable of at that time, we're going to feel extremely frustrated. And potentially we're going to use strategies that will impact our relationship with them. So for example, at this age, at the 8 to 10 month age, that might look like if we were to do cry it out strategies, that, you know, we're going to have our relationship impacted because our little one is not understanding why we're leaving them to cry. And an example of how this kind of looks like when we're, you know, projecting about the future and worrying and trying to do strategies that aren't developmentally appropriate. Another example would be like toddlers, when we expect them to share. Little ones developmentally can't grasp the concept of sharing. They're not ready to share at 2 years of age. You know, that's not something that they can do. So again, like preschoolers, we send them off to school, we expect them to sit in a classroom. They need to be playing, like that's how they learn. So I don't want to go off on a tangent too much, but I think it's really important to understand that if you can look at sleep through the lens of child development, what is my child able to do for this age, for this stage, that's going to make your expectations more realistic, and it's going to make life so much easier for you because you're not going to feel really frustrated, like you should be able to do this, why can't you do it? So I guess that's like, if you take away nothing else today, that is one of my key points. Let's switch it around and have a look at what our child can do developmentally. Because at this age, there's so much going on developmentally. So why might you be seeing a lot of issues with sleep at this age? Well, developmentally, we've got separation anxiety. So separation anxiety really starts to ramp up at around 8 months. They start to understand that you're a separate person from them, that you could leave at any time and maybe you won't come back, and that scares them. So, you know, that's ramping up. Then we've got some research that tells us that little ones that walk early, so, you know, you do hear of your 9-month-olds who are already walking, those little ones are much more likely to have their sleep impacted at this age. So obviously what's going on in the brain and all this rapid development impacts their sleep. New skills. So obviously, they also can be practicing their crawling in their sleep. If you've ever seen that, some babies do that. And that's another big one. Teething. I mean, look, the research doesn't support the idea that teething actually causes an impact on sleep, but mums all say, well, most mums say that they feel it does. And probably what happens is that when a little one's got a sore mouth and they want to suck more because it's a comfort for them, so they're waking for more feeds. So that may be how it plays out and impacts the sleep in that way. Also, as I alluded to, there's this huge push of advice, and this was something, like I said, that I got taught in my child health nurse training, is that you should be reducing night feeds by 9 months, and my clients often come to me and say that the GP has said that to them. It's just not, it's not true. Like they're not taking enough solids in to cover their nutritional needs, and we know how much, breastfeeding or formula even supports their nutrition and how much they still need those night feeds. So if you've tried to cut back feeds, you may see an increase in night waking because they're hungry. So that's a possibility. And the other thing, and I found this myself when my eldest daughter, I was in a mother's group with her, and a lot of the mums, most of the mums, I think I was one of the only ones actually, went back to work at about 9 months. Their leave kind of was winding up. They needed to go back, and So that's a huge transition, returning to paid work, transitioning to a new caregiver. So that can impact little one's sleep at this age for sure, especially when they're already going through that separation anxiety stage. You know, that's going to be a common concern. So the final thing, and to be honest, this is a big one, and this is something I do talk about a lot, is a change in sleep needs. So you might have heard of the sleep regression at this age. Again, what this is a change in sleep needs, a reduction, sudden reduction. And if a little one doesn't accommodate with their new pattern, you know, they don't accommodate their new sleep needs with a new pattern, what you can see is disturbance to the sleep regulators. So sleep is biological, it's under the control of the circadian clock and the sleep pressure. And if they don't find their new pattern, essentially you can get a mess up with the sleep pressure and the circadian clock, and you can start to see things like bedtime resistance, split nights, frequent waking, early waking. So these common kind of concerns that come up at this age, often it is actually just related to the biology first and foremost. It's but as well, obviously, there's a whole lot of other factors going on. So I guess one of the best results I see, and I did mention this last week when I was talking about younger babies, with the clients that I work with, is when they have a shift in thinking to start with, that sleep, you know, is not linear. It doesn't gradually get better as time goes on, that there are these ups and downs, but also understanding what's going on developmentally for their little one and change that expectation, and also understand their baby as an individual and how much sleep their baby needs, and look at those regulators and look at optimizing that sleep pressure, that circadian clock, and trying to get back on track in that way. Now, I do have one, tip today that I'd like to share that I think will be particularly helpful for 8 to 10 months with all that separation anxiety, with potentially that return to paid work. And that is something that I think is really missed in the whole sleep training industry. And that's connection. Build in connection time with your baby. And you might be thinking, I spend so much time with my baby. And, you know, I'm sure, you know, you do. But I know for myself at this age, I was starting to get a bit bored at home. And this might not be you, but I found that I was missing work a little bit. I was getting a bit bored with just going on coffee dates and things, and I started using my phone a bit more. You know, I was like looking for that connection online or chatting to mum friends during the day. And so yes, I was with my baby, but I wasn't really present with my baby. And if you're going back to paid work, this is especially important, to just build in that connection time where you are really present, you're really focused just on them. And particularly in the evening after your daycare pickup and that kind of thing, build in that connection time. And then with your night times, maybe look at changing your setup with your sleeping arrangements. If your little one's in a cot in their own room and you're experiencing a lot of wakes at this age, you might want to consider moving them into the same room as you, or changing your setup, whether that be a sidecar, bed sharing, floor bed, something like that, so that they feel like they're close to you. And I know a lot of people worry that once they make a change like that, they can't go back. They think, oh no, if we go down that line when they're already sleeping independently in their cot, then we're going to have to like change it later. How are we going to change it? They're not going to like it. All of these kind of thoughts and worries pop up. But let's just, again, be present in the moment and say, okay, I'm going to meet my little one where they're at right now, and I'm going to do what they need right now for this stage of development. And if we can change that mindset, and if we can meet them where they're at developmentally at each stage along the way, it just makes such a radical difference to your experience and to their experience, and less frustration for everyone. So let me know in the comments if this is making sense, if this is resonating with you. I'd love to know. And yeah, so I guess just as a summary, you know, we need to look at building that connection, supporting them through this developmental stage, and looking at, again, the sleep regulators, looking at sleep holistically, looking at your own setup at nighttime, not just to meet their needs, but also to get more rest for yourself. And look at all of those things, your own self-care. What can you do to get yourself through a difficult time? And especially if you're returning to paid work and you're so worried about how you're going to manage during the day. So let's look at what we can do to support your rest as well. So if you've got, if you're experiencing a lot of challenges right now with sleep and you'd really like to bounce some ideas around, feel free to send me a message. I'm happy to brainstorm with you, happy to have a chat. And otherwise, I will see you next week. Okay, bye.